You just need to go to their website, trust me.
Okay, so I want to thank you, and thank you for all those people in the gallery that have stayed. I mean, we are streaming. I do believe streaming services are working today, so I know a few people had asked that on the way out the door, because unfortunately last week we had a technological, whatever happens to technology. Mine always seems to be broken, so I just assume that's just the way of the world. Anyways, thank you for those that have stayed in council chambers tonight. So at this point, I would like to call the special council meeting of Monday, June the 23rd to order at 7:16. And there are no late items, so I would ask if I can have an adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor? And that carries. Could I have just a couple more hands, just an attempt at people approving the agenda? Thank you. And so we are on then to item number 5, bylaws. So the official community plan amendment bylaw number 3634 2025 and zoning amendment bylaw number 3635 2025 were introduced to council on June 3rd, 2025 and received first and second reading at that time. A public hearing has now been held and council is now being asked to pass third reading of the bylaw amendments. We do have staff here to give an overview, or we can just move on to recommendations. So council, your pleasure is, do you want to hear some more from staff or?
They've been working hard.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, so there's 2 recommendations there.
Yes.
So if you could start with,
Okay, so number 1.
sorry? So moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Payne.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you, that's what I was,
Oh, sorry.
all good.
Okay, so
She didn't ask, but I was ready.
so number 1, that the official community plan amendment bylaw number 3634 2025 be introduced and read a third time by title only.
Okay, so recommendation number 1 has been moved and seconded. Council discussion.
As the mover, do you want to go first?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just like, could somebody tell me what's going on in the hallway? Because I'm, sorry. Okay, so seeing no discussion by Councillor Tate.
Thanks. Thanks to staff for all the work. I think we're up to 485 pages now. Well done. It's a lot of pages. Thanks to public for coming tonight. It was nice to hear such a variety of views, and it's nothing I think that anyone hasn't heard before, which is great. So kind of getting that all out in one place, in one space is a great thing to do. I've been working on this for a long time now, just like we all have, and I also sit on the Rec Commission, so seeing it with a number of different hats. And there's some factors that I've been considering a lot, and I'll kind of outline the 3 that I'm looking at. I'm looking at the housing needs as one of the factors for decision making, the recreation component as one of the factors for decision making, and then the RDCK component as one of the factors for decision making. And it is a lot. It's 485 pages and then some, right? So I just want to speak to the housing needs for a second. And I've said this before in public, like a growing city is a healthy city. So whether you're growing because your population is aging and so you're living longer and so your population is growing, that's healthy. Whether you've got folks moving in because there's some kind of economic driver, that's healthy. And we want to have a growing city, which means we're gonna need more housing. I will always advocate for using our current square footage more optimally, and I don't think we're doing that yet. And I'd like to find better ways to do that. having said that, I wanted to, and one of our speakers mentioned it, but I have a list as well, just looking at the housing that we have in the pipeline so that we can, I think, like reduce a little bit of that pressure as we look at what things are already in the pipeline. And recognizing that we don't yet know the impacts of the rental market based on the reductions of the international students, right? I work at the college and we haven't recognized those impacts on the rental market yet, so we'll have to see how that plays out. We know that we've got transitional housing at the North Shore Inn that's right now just the temporary modular units, but that's going to be renovated so that we've got transitional, which ends up being semi-permanent for some folks, housing. We know from the Housing Committee meeting minutes from January 16th, February 20th, and March 27th that there's conversations around BC Housing's progress at the Government Road project. We know from the Chamber of Commerce that are moving forward with their BC Builds workforce housing down in Railtown. We're aware of the Vernon Street Seniors Housing Project, which I think is going to have an impact that we might not recognize how good of an impact that will have, because I know there's a lot of seniors living in large houses right now that are ready to downsize and are waiting for those spaces. So that's going to make quite a different shift, I think, that we be interesting to see how that plays out. Of course, we know about the Kulos development, which is going to have multi-unit, so it's going to have condos as well as townhouses. And then this council approved the extension of Trevor Street, which gives an opportunity for single-family houses as well. So this is a really good spectrum of the types of housing that's in the pipeline for Nelson. And I think I'm like super impressed that we've been able to get all of, like, check all those boxes as we go along.
Halo.
As we go along.
Sorry, I just wanted to add the one that I didn't hear you mention, the Halo project. Zoned in.
Yeah, I think
Is that
there's
okay?
6. Yeah, there's 6. Yeah, thanks. Great, yeah, that one as well. So the second thing that's floating through my head is this recreation part, and I heard people talk about like one or the other, and I really want to move away from that, and I don't think anyone's feeling that in their hearts, but it can sound like that sometimes when we're trying to simplify a conversation over coffee. When council presented the city-owned lots to the Greater Nelson Economic Development, which I sit on that as well, the council table said, okay, this could be great. Why don't you talk to the RDCK and incorporate those lots, and why don't you also consider putting in some recreation, because that would be awesome. And council asked Greater Nelson Economic Development and or the proponent to look at that as a win-win, which can be tricky to get a win-win, but that was the direction of council, like let's find the win-win here. And the proponent went out and did the work and went to the open houses and got a lot of feedback, and it was sometimes really tough, but there was a lot of feedback around, okay, how can we make this rec space work best? How can we get a win-win? And unfortunately, when the numbers came back, it wasn't a win-win. And I sit in the rec commission and we looked at the numbers, and this was not going to be a win-win. And so now that work isn't for naught, because there hasn't been this kind of proposal before where you have like a recreation/housing proposal. So I don't think it's for naught. I think that a lot of good work has been done, and there's opportunities to start bringing more people to the table, whether it's like more than one nonprofit or a nonprofit with a private sector investor or some sporting groups. Like, we don't really quite know who will be the right people to bring to the table to get to the win-win, but it seems like we're not quite there yet. There's no doubt that there's interest in the community to find that win-win, and we heard it here tonight. So I think about that. That's another aspect of what I'm thinking. And now that the RDCK has not released that land for this project, the last thing I really want to talk about is the planning aspect of this. And what we do at this table is planning for the future. So we're the stewards of public space and public land and the OCP. And the thoughtful planning has to prioritize like this. We're gonna have a space there, if the housing project were to go through, you'd have a space in between the existing NDCC and the new building that's not very wide and really difficult to access. It would be very expensive to build on, and it's gonna reduce the continuity on the street front. And overall, from a planning perspective, I think that it's not the best way to move forward. It's not gonna contribute to long-term livability, and we're entrusted to shape that. We're entrusted to look at our community and look at the plots of land and see how can we make this work for the future? And how can we be fiscally responsible for having that little section of land to try to build on it in the future? I think would be really expensive, inaccessible, and problematic. So orphaning that space between two large buildings really undermines our role as the stewards of community planning at this table, which is one of the key components of what we do here. So from that perspective, looking at the housing needs and the recreation collaboration and the notion of orphaning that space in between the two buildings, I will not support moving forward with a zoning bylaw amendment to add the housing to these lots. It's, from my perspective, it's not good planning and we're not there yet. Thanks.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but I feel like I need to. Thank you, Mayor. So I guess kind of in response to that, I feel like one of our jobs here is to constantly be like 10 or 20 years out in the future and be planning for where this town is going and what it needs and what its citizens need. As you all know, that we've had a 0% vacancy rate here for 15 years, if not more. And I feel like because of that challenge is one of the reasons why we have so many affordable housing units in the pipeline. And of course, they may not all go ahead. Some may not happen because granting won't be achieved. But I do feel like we're trying to kind of make up for what wasn't happening for a long time. I think, Nelson Cares was continuing that work and building a project, I don't know, I think about every 5 or 8 years or something like that. Trying to continue the work to get us away from a 0% vacancy rate. I feel like some of the literature I've read says that what we should have is kind of a healthy 3 to 5% vacancy rate, and not so close to the bone that we're just barely there. To me, all these projects that are in the pipeline, if most of them go through, I feel like that would bring us up into that kind of like 2 to 3% maybe vacancy rate, and more ability for people to come here and work. I mean, I'm just thinking about all of the people who work in our service industry. This town is a tourist town, and so there's a huge amount of population that works in the service industry that the rents have gone above their ability to pay for rent. And that's why I think for the economic health of our town, a healthy selection of moderate to low income housing is critical. And I understand the argument about that things are shifting in terms of population density. But as far as I also understand, Nelson kind of grows about 2 to 3% a year, which is a solid, healthy growth. But put that 10 years, we're talking like a sizable new population. And to have that full spectrum of people who can live here, we need that full spectrum of housing. And so for me, these projects are projects for the future and for what our town's gonna be in 10 years. And so for me, they're actually super important assets. Now, I wanna also recognize rec is critical. I think there is an incredible amount of rec we have in this town and lots of services, and of course, they can be improved and they can be updated. But my mind and my heart sits in that place of, if you don't have a roof over your head, you're not accessing rec, you're just trying to take care of yourself and understand where the next meal's coming from, or how you're gonna pay your next rent, or so on and so forth. So for me, it really is that housing, a good supply of housing and a good selection of housing, full spectrum, is really that kind of ideal situation for a healthy town. And that is for me, that is the key to a healthy future in this part of the world. So I don't wanna, I'm not trying to sideline rec, or I'm not saying rec is not important, it's critical. And we have an amazing group of rec groups in this town. They do all kinds of work. But roofs over heads, I think is really the critical piece moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Payne?
There is one thing I just want to draw our attention to, and that is at the last meeting, we did get our annual report. And year in a glance, it says the population of Nelson, whenever people were asking me how large Nelson was, I was telling them 11,500 because that was the last number I had. So in this report, the population is now 12,346. So our population has gone up by 800 approximately persons. And the units that have been built over the same period were 87 units. So you just need to look at that number. To me, that sort of demonstrates that we've got 1 unit added to our housing stock for every 10 people. That's not getting us to a healthy vacancy rate. So we do have other units coming on board, and I didn't go far enough, and I'm not as fast as some other councillors on my math, of doing the calculation of even adding in all of those units. Would that get us, above zero? I also would like to, so I think that's current, specific to Nelson, relevant data. I also want to point out that I was very gratified to see so many people come and speak tonight on both sides of the issues. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that community input so we can make a well-rounded decision. But I also think it's important to consider the 40+ written comments that we received, which were not only from individuals, but from organizations who were overwhelmingly in support of this project. And if you haven't had an opportunity to look at those emails and the number of correspondence that we did receive, it wasn't, slightly more. It was overwhelming. And Ken, I can't remember the exact numbers. It was 40+ that we received, and
it was 42 in support, 5 not in support.
So, and reading through those emails, there were reasons to move forward with this project that even working in the housing sphere, I hadn't really fully considered the ramification of many of the benefits that this would offer us. Are there more recreational opportunities that we need to explore? I think the city has stepped up. I mean, isn't the Cube an example of that, where land was brought forward for a recreational opportunity? I think one of the things that I wrote down here was that someone mentioned that there's other land that we can develop. Or wouldn't we say that of recreation as well? Until we've exhausted what those opportunities are, not only directly on the rec campus, but throughout the city. The report, the master plan, was it 2012, 2013? That's 12 to 13 years ago that we've had the master plan. This is an opportunity that's presenting itself to us now to solve a crisis that we see when we walk down the street now. We have friends, we have relations, we have children growing to that spot where they'll need their own housing as well. This is the crisis before us now today that I think is so important to address. And this project is only getting us a fraction of the way there, which is why the accumulation of all the projects that Councillor Tate has listed right along the housing continuum is so important. We're going to be working our way out of the deficit created by the Canadian government abdicating their responsibility to social housing in the 80s for the next 20 or more years if we get very, very aggressive. It's not an overnight fix. This is not the one thing that will do it, but it is a step in the right direction in a location that will make those residents less car dependent, which is one of the other key pillars of the strategic direction for the city of Nelson. So I am in strong support, and I think we can get to a win-win for recreation. There's so many opportunities that we just haven't tapped yet. But I don't want to wait another 12 to 13 years for that to happen while that property sits vacant.
Councillor Page.
Not on this one.
Not on this one. You don't want to commit.
Oh, on this one.
Oh, okay. So, I need to say that, I'll just start by saying that I'm not in favor of the official community plan amendment either. And some of it is actually what Councillor Payne, just actually said. And some of it is what Councillor Tate said, and I don't know if I need to repeat myself, but I will repeat it. One is that I truly believe that the provincial and federal governments have contributed grossly to the housing shortage that we have now. And as many things is, this has now been left to municipalities to scramble to build more housing. Once again, with limited resources and and very few financial ways to do it. And so it's, actually, I think I can back up. It's not that I'm like in terms of the fact that whether or not we change this OCP or the zoning, I think both of the changes actually expand the potential of what this land could be used for. But at this particular junction, and we've done that. I think we need to make it clear to the public, we have done OCP changes and to facilitate what the OCP looks like, what zoning should be then for that change in the OCP. But in this case, it also has this project attached to it. So because the minute we pass both this OCP and the zoning, this project has been then, for lack of a better word, green lighted. So the fact that we're expanding the uses of the property, I like that. But the fact that the trigger is then that a project is going through, I'm struggling with that at this time. Councillor Payne, Tate listed all of the projects. The North Shore Inn needs to be rebuilt, that's just temporary. 45 Government Road is being worked on to bring in some more beds of supportive housing. We have the Chamber of BC Builds project, hopefully it might finally get shovels in the ground come later this fall. We have the Fell Street project that we just put through. We have all of the privately sort of funded ones, which would be like Kulos and Trevor Street and Halo and the independent living units. And there was other land. And I think my greatest disappointment might actually be that BC Housing owns a big piece of land here in Nelson, and they've not at any time reached out to either Share or to Nelson to perhaps look at proposals being built on that land. And I hear, and because I've heard it for 25 years, that something is gonna get built on those lands in Fairview. But I think that was another big missed opportunity where probably 100 or more units, I've heard as much as 150, I believe, coming from the housing committee, units could be built on that land, which would make a substantive bite out of our affordable housing shortage. And so when we talk about missed opportunities or opportunities, I think that's a very large missed opportunity there that could have been very helpful. And then when you're building something of size that's scalable, and so with that kind of size also the cost potentially are better captured than building 50, 50, 50, 50, 40, 30 in terms of housing units. So there is some scale things there. I worry about workforce, all of these projects coming. So in my discussions with the BC Builds, they're looking at probably having, when that project comes in, they're probably having to go out of town to bring in the crew that will build that building. Those aren't jobs that are in Nelson. Yeah, those people are gonna have to eat in a restaurant, yes, so we will have some economic benefit of that. But do we have the workforce and the skilled trades here? And I worry about that, and then a number of projects getting carried out. I know that there was some struggle with Nelson Care, which is when they built the project on Nelson Avenue, that set it back in terms of completion date. And again, a lot of that was about supplies and inventory and getting crews in. So I wonder about workforce. I wonder about workforce in terms of bringing people on to help with just capacity. I think that Nelson Cares is the best operator a community can have. We are like the envy of at least southeastern British Columbia. Because they're just like, well, if you go to a conference, if we had Nelson Cares, we'd have housing. And you know what? So we're very lucky to have Nelson Cares. This is not about Nelson Cares. But I do, again, worry about their capacity because they're involved with the North Shore Inn. They're gonna have to guide the redevelopment of that project. I'm hoping, because at this point, 45 Government Road will go out to tender for an operator. I'm hoping that it's Nelson Cares that puts a bid in to be the operator there. They need to have staff and capacity to run that. I don't want an operator that lives on Vancouver Island or in Prince George being the operator of a supportive housing unit here in Nelson. I want a local operator. I'm hoping Nelson Cares will step forward at that time. Again, capacity. How much capacity do these organizations have to continue to take on all of this work? And so, and as for recreation, you know what? My family benefited from the recreational resources in this town. But I can tell you that I'm no fool and that I've listened to the discussions around the recreation table. I sat there in 1999 when I was elected to council, and I still have sat there now for the last 10 years. And I can pretty much say with quite a bit of certainty that, Councillor Payne, you are probably correct. Nothing's gonna get built on that corner for a number of years in terms of recreation because of the extraordinary cost, just like building housing, recreation costs a lot to build. And I am willing to work with recreation groups to try to find some win-wins, but I need to also make it clear it's not because there will be those in the town that said, you went against housing because your family was all about recreation. It's like, there are drawbacks there as well as the drawbacks that I see. So I'm really conflicted about this. And because of that, I just need to be thinking, we need to be slowing this down a little bit and taking a look and making sure that we can do what's kind of already on the books and then add in. It's not like, we know that this is a rolling intake for this community housing fund. So July 31st is the first date. It's not the last date. Perhaps something as crazy as this goes back to recreation and the decision is made to go to referendum and ask the people if they want to spend the money to do the combined facility on those 4 lots. I don't really know, but there's lots of discussions that still can be had. But I think that, I think we have lots of opportunity. We need to do these projects that we've got sort of on the books now. Do them well, do them with the excellence that Nelson is known for, and then add on additional projects. And I would like to see that land in Fairview get moved to the top of the list as a site for housing development. Sorry, recreation, you're not going there, but for housing development, it's always been there. That's always what it was earmarked for. And I think we've really missed on not pushing harder to see that there. So there you go, you have my comments. So Councillor Page, if you don't have any comments, I think we could go to the vote. Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I think it is presumptuous of this table to make a decision based on the perceived, concern about whether we have the workforce to complete these projects. And whether we feel that a social service agency in town has the capacity to manage these projects. That is a concern to me. I think the other factor is, even if the Fell Street project is moving forward, will that project get funded? There's just too many variables not to lay down all our cards on the table as far as that. We know the BC Builds project has been delayed significantly based on a number of different factors. Presume it's moving forward. That building has taken a mighty long time to get that yellow up above the tree line there, and there have been pauses in that. So these are factors beyond our control, but offering the best opportunity to move these projects forward, I do believe is within our ability to make that decision. We're just advancing to the next step. There are steps beyond that. Changing the zoning doesn't commit us, changing the OCP doesn't commit us to the project. It just leaves the door open to the next step. And that's why I think it's not we're not, you say we're green lighting it. I don't think we're not the green lighters. The government with the funding to contribute millions of dollars to our community to solve a challenge that we have, whether or not it is of a municipal making or a provincial or a federal making. These are people who live in our community. And my feeling is that is who we are looking to care for. So I don't know that concern over the workforce. We know that we have concern over the workforce. That's how this whole thing got started with workforce housing. So without this particular project, we don't have what was mentioned. This project is open doors to seniors and families and singles. Fell Street is a workforce project, and we have supportive housing. So this project is filling a hole that isn't in any of the projects out there right now. Will BC Housing come through in that other one? They say they're going to, but you've been hearing that for a long time. Fingers crossed that they do have a team on it and are moving forward, but they're looking at 4 years down the road. So I can't say that to people that I know who are living in their cars, sleeping on someone's couch and living in unsafe environments where they have nowhere to go to escape from violence.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. I think my final statement here is that if we nix this project and we don't move forward, and that plot of land sits there for 10, 15 years empty, I know I'm gonna live with that. We could have actually made a difference and we could have housed people, but we didn't. That is gonna sit heavy. I mean, I've lived in this community for most of my life. I've seen the struggle. I've been through the struggle trying to find housing. Even though I'm sitting on as a counselor, our family is, we're close to the bone. And, you know, we got a house, we were able to buy a house almost 10 years ago, barely. And if I were trying to do that now in our family, no way, we would be totally out of luck. So for me, it's really personal, because I live very, very close to those edges. And I know how important affordable housing is, and I know how important affordable housing is to the future health of our community. Because not everyone coming here can just go out and buy an $800,000 to $1 million home, or even like a $600,000 condo. It's just not gonna happen for a lot of people. We still want people in this community with a whole variety of skill sets and personalities and abilities. So I feel like for me, it's like beyond anything, it's just we need to participate in helping house people and making this town not a place that is just for the upper class, the wealthy, which we're always quivering on, because of the cost of housing here is just ridiculous for a little town. But here we have an opportunity to actually fill an empty lot that's been sitting empty for so long. If we refuse that a bit, and then it sits there empty again for 10 or 15 years, it's just, to me, it just seems like a bit of a dereliction of like, where we're letting something go. We have it in our hand. It's a total possibility. We can do this. And I just feel like throwing it away because of some concerns about how it's gonna get done, or will we have the staffing or the builder, I mean, that can all be dealt with. But what can be dealt with is missing a funding opportunity that may disappear in the next budget. So I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Okay, I think everybody that wanted to speak, Councillor Tate.
I'll just remind us how important it is at this table that even though we can feel it, it's important that our decision-making is not driven by our personal experiences. It's our role to look at the community from way up high. And we do have a need to have more housing, particularly in all communities, particularly in the lower end of the continuum, because that's where the need is greatest. That's what the housing needs study shows us. And we do have those projects on the go. Looking at these steps with the OCP and the zoning amendment is going to put us in a position of orphaning a little slice of land, and it's really poor planning. It's gonna be really difficult to build there in the future. It's going to make it like extraordinarily expensive if that's the space that the RDCK wants to hold for recreation. It's gonna make it really difficult to access based on the topography and context. And a lot of those letters came in before June 17th when that decision was made. So just being aware of that context. I know that there is support in the community for affordable housing, and there definitely is support at this table, and there's definitely support in the actions that we are making and the decisions that we're making. But we need to be really careful about the planning aspect of it, because nobody else is responsible for the planning aspect of it, just us. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Can I just ask about the orphaning thing?
No, we're not really supposed to be like
Okay, I'm
debating
just,
with each other
that
or,
was a question I had out of the public hearing, but yeah.
I think you can ask staff for clarification.
yeah, you could, if you have a question there for,
Yeah.
or even,
So the original building, there was a walkway from the,
it's attached to
current,
the existing building, yeah.
a what?
It's attached to the existing.
Yeah, it was attached. So I'm not sure why that couldn't just
Well, that
be
would
the
be,
same. Like if
that would
they're
be how-
standalone building, it would be attached. So that's why I'm not understanding why it's orphaned. It's not orphaned, it's just moving to another family. Our family, you know, the housing family is over here and the recreational family is over here. So 3 lots are gonna be in one family and the last lot is gonna be with its recreation family.
I think
So
the point
is
is,
it, that's
it
not
would have to
orphaned to
be
me.
part of the NDCC.
Yeah.
Which is what was
is
anticipated
what-
in 2012 or whatever.
Wants, isn't it?
So it
They
couldn't
want
be,
that property for.
it's likely it couldn't be a standalone building, it would be attached to the NDCC.
Yeah, so I don't think of that as orphaning it. So I just wanted some clarity on that. So it would just be an addition.
Yeah.
So it would still be fully accessible,
From the NDCC, yes.
which is what we're looking at. It's a rec facility, fully accessible from the current rec facility, like an addition, which I presume would be less expensive than a standalone building anyway, so. But I'm not, that's not my skill set. Okay, I just wanted some clarity around that. I didn't understand that orphaning. I didn't think anyone would be building a straight up, all by itself building there. Thank you.
Any other comments, councillors? Okay, so the first recommendation that the official committee plan amendment bylaw number 3634/2025 be introduced and read a third time by title only. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And those opposed? And that carries. Recommendation number 2, is there a mover? Councillor Woodward. Second by Councillor Page. Councillor Woodward.
The zoning amendment bylaw number 3635/2025 be introduced and read a third time by title only.
Okay. Discussions regarding the zoning amendment bylaw.
The mover has nothing?
No.
Thanks to staff and staff at both local governments for all the work we've done to get to this point. Thanks for the public to come out and share throughout all these processes. There's obviously some meeting fatigue. This has been many a meeting getting to this point. I agree with much that has been said about how we support our community getting affordable housing, getting housing that makes sense for their lives, for the wages that are supported in this area. It's clear within the stats, and I think one of the members of the public really put it succinctly when they would talk to how people's entire capacity is being consumed by what they pay towards housing and the basic needs, and that's not a healthy situation for a community. I also want to be clear that in my mind at this stage, I'm separating out what we've learned from this process. We heard it a lot within the public tonight. They want both. They want this land to do both. They want this land to accomplish multiple needs at once. They want that mixed use. And that's what this decision in front of us today tells us. It tells us that we have laid down, taken that learning, had those hard knocks, had those hard conversations, and gotten one of the many muddy things about what could or couldn't happen here out of the way. So my support currently on this decision around land use specifically, for mixed use, for consolidated use of it so that we could do housing and recreation is a yes. But I'm putting a flag on that yes, because there are other decisions coming down impacted by the July 31st deadline that talk about what the building itself is, talk about the orphan lot, which, speaks to opportunity to put something together that when it has multiple needs versus one very small lot that we may not be able to do much with, or the cost of building in the future will be much higher than trying to do it together. When those decisions come forward, and a lot of councillors have spoken to items that really sit squarely on those future decisions around the building, I'm gonna have a much more critical view of whether the building that we've gotten coming forward is the building that's gonna serve all those needs. But here at land use, on zoning, this is the right land use, this is the right mix of things we need to be building, this is one less complication we can remove from our plate. When we get to what the building actually is, I have reservations as well, serious ones.
I have a question for staff.
Councillor Tate.
Thanks. So based on that, my understanding is that the zoning does not require that the building be mixed, only that the building could be mixed based on the zoning.
I get that.
The decision point that council still has is, are you gonna make the land available? So you're zoning to allow this project, but council has, at this time, what's the resolution that you've made, it has to have a recreation component. So on July 8th, as you saw in the staff report, it will come back recommending that you make it available for housing. And so that's a separate decision that you will make.
I
So
understand
even though
that.
you change the land use, you still have to make a decision, are you gonna make it available for housing only?
And I understand that. I just also recognize that there is a point of crossing the Rubicon, and we've had a lot of these conversations for the last 12 or 13 months. And it's a really good moment to say, pump the brakes. Let's make sure we're looking from 10,000, 30,000, 40,000 feet. Get the win-win. The Rubicon, it's a river,
It's River?
it's a
Okay.
river. It's Rubicon.
Councillors, any other further comments? Questions? Seeing none, we've had it moved and seconded that the zoning amendment bylaw number 3635/2025 be introduced and read a third time by title only. All those in favor? And opposed? And that carries. Thank you, councillors. So, if I could now have a resolution to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much to those in the gallery that stayed with us and those that went home and turned on the YouTube station to watch the final debate.